Welcome to the Living Beyond ADHD podcast. If you're looking for a fresh perspective and actionable steps on hot topics from focus to follow through to self-management and more, you are in the right place. Welcome your host, innovative educator, coach, and psychotherapist, Dr. B. This podcast is sponsored by Pure Potential with Dr. B. You can head over to drbarbaracohen.com and find the podcast transcript, grade-free content, plus information on programs and services, including the groundbreaking Adventures in Achievement online coaching program and one-to-one services with Dr. B. That's drbarbaracohen.com.
Hey, dears. Today I'm continuing my interview with Danny, an artistic soul who was diagnosed with ADHD in his 40s. When we left off at the end of the last episode, Danny had just experienced an epiphany that ADHD might be the source of many of his struggles in life. This episode starts with Danny's revelations from listening to an audiobook on ADHD. And then he describes a very dark time in his life and where he found a lifeline.
And that so much of just listening to an hour or two's worth of audiobook, and I was already, some stuff that was going on when I was 43, I had already lost both of my parents within the last couple of years. I had graduated, had a film production company fall apart, had a real falling out with some of my friends because we couldn't pay the bills and we went our separate ways. And I was living alone in one of my father's houses and really self-isolating in a very unhealthy way. And so this diagnosis felt like a godsend in a time where I was really struggling. At that point in my life, and this is just prior to meeting you and finding the group, I was deeply suicidal. There's no other way to say it. That lifelong low-grade depression was raging. I would wake up every morning, and I lived in a 2-story house. My bedroom was upstairs. And I used to picture walking into a noose at the top of the stairs so I don't have to face the day, right? Just walk into a noose. It was just constant. And I've talked about this before, so I know you know all this stuff. So I'm comfortable with it being out there. If I had ever owned a gun, because I woke up with a voice in my head telling me that I've failed, I'm worthless, that I'm 43 years old and alone, that it was just all this big picture stuff. At the time, I was also deeply in student loan debt, which I had no prospects for getting out of. It was heavy, it was and I had been living that way for a while without having told anybody, I didn't have health insurance. I was in the middle of trying to deal with just at the beginning of trying to deal with my father's estate. And just prior to finding out sort of this ADHD thing, I told my brother that I was suicidal. Just sort of coming out to my family as being majorly depressed was huge. That was so the first thing we did was try and get me health insurance. And I did that. And the first thing I did with the health insurance was obviously get a physical, because that's the thing they make you do. But it took a little while for maybe 3 months for the mental health portion of my insurance to kick in, which sucks because when you're in crisis, that wait is just horrible, right? But I didn't go there my first appointment to deal with my depression. I went there to get diagnosed with ADHD. Like I knew, like, this is what's going on, and I need to deal with this because I've never, in my entire life, I've never dealt with all this underlying stuff that like is one of the major causes why my life is the way it is, right? So like that, and so like our first doctor that they hooked me up with was a guy who did specialize in ADHD, but like, so I went for him for my diagnosis, and he told, like, I took the battery of tests that they did, and he said to me that like I tested really high for everything except the hyperactivity. Like, and I was like, duh. And so like just the formal diagnosis, which it was almost like a formality, right? It was almost like a technicality at that point, was massive. It was huge. It was like, and then, so after that, they had some like Kaiser, which was my healthcare provider at the time, had some, you know, informal like group therapy stuff, but it was nothing like, I tried it a little bit. It was just like, it wasn't consistent enough. There wasn't, so I knew that I would have to look for resources out there. And yours was one of the first things that I found for adults with ADHD that like even existed as a resource, right? And so I was like, I wasn't expecting a ton. I was like, I'm just gonna go. I'm just gonna see how this is. And so something we haven't talked about is that in spite of me, you know, not being diagnosed with ADHD, I've always been a self-help guy. Like I've always been trying to fix whatever I thought was wrong, even if I didn't have a name for it, even if I didn't know that all these different things were part of my disorder. Like, but I've always been just like big on self-improvement and big on trying to like fix whatever's wrong. So like I had a whole library of self-help books, a whole bookshelf filled with self-help books. So like the first night I went was a great night to go because you guys were doing tips, like practical tips. And for me, I wanted actual practical things. It was sort of like one of the things I was looking for of okay, now that I have this thing and I know what it is, how do I manage my life with it? Like, how do I, you know, and I was just starting on meds at that point, and I made the mistake a lot of people with ADHD make. I thought taking the pill was going to cure everything, right? I really did. Like, I thought it was going to be dramatic. And I think at the point of that first meeting, I was still getting my dosage adjusted. Like, that's how new it was. Like, I didn't really have, so I still had those expectations that pills were going to change my life and cure me.
Right.
But I also knew that it wasn't going to be something that I wanted to do by myself, right? Like I needed support. Like I needed to be around people because I didn't know anybody. Like I was at a point where I felt like I had been hit by a truck. Like that is how I would put it. Like I walked into that room not knowing like what to do, where to go, like, is my life going to get better? I had some hope for the pills, but like, not only was I green, I was exhausted. Like, I was just, you know, I was in a bad place still. You know, I still had those screaming voices of worthlessness in my head. Like, I still woke up to that every day, even after that. So the things that like people shared were really cool, like about how you open your mail and how you like just all these little things that were just like perfect. Like it were speaking to me in a way I needed.
Right.
but I have to say, like, it was the wins thing that happened at the very beginning of the meeting. And it was so important to me to hear that a win could be anything, that it could be anything positive that happened to you during the week. And like, when you came to me, like, I don't even remember if I had a win. Like, I don't, it's the thing that people usually do where they'll go like, well, I made it here, and it's like, but I knew, like, it's something that like just clicked in my brain. It was like, I've always been a pretty self-aware person. And I was like, dude, I know that there's good that has happened to me. It just gets drowned out by all of the things I don't have, right? Like, things I'm not, the things that like I feel like are weighing me down, or like just like I was so big picture focused, and I felt dwarfed. Like, I felt dwarfed by my debt. I felt dwarfed by my lack of a love life. I felt dwarfed by the fact that all my brothers have families and I don't have a family. And like, I felt everything's wrong. Everything's wrong, like, and I don't know how to make it right. Like, it was all of that was huge in my mind. Like, all of that was massive. So like, whatever good happened, it was like, yeah, it's good right now. But it's like, what does that mean? Like, and I, like, so much to the point where I might not feel it for very long. Right. Like, and so a week later, I'm going to retain that. What, are you crazy? So like, I don't know if I had anything like that I said when you came to me, but man, my voice was cracking. I was a deer in the headlights. I was like, I wasn't functioning. And you can almost hear it right now. Like, just going back there is that like, my voice was cracking. Like, I couldn't really get the words out. Like, but I knew that this was something I was interested in. And I remember like just listening to other people like share their wins. And like, there was, I don't want to use anybody's name, but like there was somebody in the far distant corner of the room who to me was like a beacon of light. And like, I was really moved by his brightness and cheeriness. And it was obvious to me that many of the people in the room not only had ADHD, but were dealing with problems that weren't even my problems. Like, that I could tell that people were struggling. I could tell that like people were, and that it felt good to me. Like, I don't, there's something about that, like, okay, I don't know these people, but they're here, and some of them are dealing with stuff I've never had to deal with. So that like, that's amazing, right? And then there's some people here who like have ADHD and have had it their whole life and are happy. What? Like, what? Like, so like, in the back of my mind, sort of two things that sort of happened. I was like, I want to be like that guy over there. He's beaming, right? I would like to be that's one thing. And then the other thing was like, what is this wins thing? And how come I've never read about it? How come I've never heard of this? How come I've never been given, I don't think I use this word, but like, how come I've never been given permission to look at the bright side, to just like, and so like, I did ask you about it, and it blew me away that like, you didn't know where you got it from, that you had been using it all this time. And I'm like, I'm someone who's very schooled in psychology and pop psychology and self-help, but I've never heard of this. And this thing is crazy. Like, this thing is, I'm like, on my drive home, I was like, I'm gonna have something for I'm coming back, but I'm gonna have something for next week. So like, I'm just gonna look out for whatever that is. And it didn't take long, because I pulled over for gas in Thousand Oaks, and I found $5 laying next to my car when I got out to pump my gas. And I was just like, dude, that's a win. Like that's, that's not, and like, me, finding money is one of my favorite things. It's something that happens a lot. But like, even if it's just $5, it's just like, that's the thing that like you can and should smile about. And despite whatever else is going on, that's good. There is good.
Thanks for listening to part 2 of this 4-part series of my interview with Danny. I know many, many people can relate to going through dark periods in their lives, and I'm here to give you hope, real hope, that things can get better. Stay tuned, because the next episode we'll talk a lot more about the brain and how to deal with cognitive hyperactivity.
Thanks for your undivided attention. If you're eager to make positive changes in your life, head over to drbarbaracohen.com to see how Dr. B can help you today. Whether you love making changes with community support in a group environment or prefer one-to-one coaching or psychotherapy, you'll find all the information you need to get started at drbarbaracohen.com.